Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. And I'm very excited for today's virtual field trip. We're heading to Toronto to the Ripley's Aquarium of Canada, where we're going to have a really fun hangout hosted by Danielle Eisner. So she's going to be telling us a little bit about the kelp tank at the aquarium. You're going to notice there's two divers in the tank, Sophie Wolven and Sam Murchie, and they're going to be interacting with the different species. And the whole point of this hangout is we've been celebrating biodiversity all month long. And many of you know biodiversity is the variety of life on Earth, from insects to mammals to birds and everything in between. So we're going to take a little trip into the tank, and we're going to learn a little bit about some of the biodiversity found in this amazing ecosystem in Canadian water. So Danielle, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. As you can see in the middle of our screen, one of our shy fish, the wolf eel, has come out to say hi. The long blue fish, they usually like to stay and hide in caves. So we're very lucky to actually get to see our wolf eel. They probably knew exactly what we were doing today. So that is our wolf eel hanging out with Sophie, our diver. And you can see them eat. They actually like shellfish a lot, so they usually crush their food. And today it looks like they're eating a lot of different fish and squid that is chopped up into little bits. So it's little bite-sized pieces for all of our lovely sea creatures in here. These animals, if you do ever come to visit our aquarium, they do like to hide in their caves. So you usually just see their heads poking out of their caves. And I can show you their caves. There's actually one right over here. I'll point to it right there. The fish is in the way. Right there, there's a little hole. That's where their head usually is. So we do have two divers. This is Sophie, and then Sam is actually at the back. You can see his bubbles. And they are in the Pacific Kelp forest. So this is one of our tallest habitats at the aquarium. So if you take a short bus and you flip it on its end, this is how tall it is. So I'm just scroll all the way up, and you can see the ladder where they came in. The water's just slightly above what the ladder is, so it's at 24 feet. Inside this habitat, as you can see, there are many fish being fed right now, many different types. Most of the fish in here are just different species of rockfish. So this one right here in front of us is a rockfish, same with the one behind it, and this one over here. They get their name mainly because they look like rocks, but I don't really see it. There's another fish in here that's called the sculpin that to me looks way more like a rock. However, there are also some flatfish here. So you can see they're very skinny fish swimming sideways, and they do have two eyes on one side of their head. So they're a little different from most of the other fish in here. Although when they were born, they started with both eyes on one eye on one side and one eye on the other, just like a typical fish does. As you can see, our wolf eel is hanging out with the diver for a while. They could be super hungry, but in the case of our wolf eels, they're actually very friendly. So they come to say hi. They're like little puppy dogs. So sometimes they just want to hang out with us when we're in the water. So the rockfish that I was mentioning before, the oldest one ever recorded was 205 years old. So they can get really, really old. And they can grow really big as well. But because they are a fishery for us, we actually end up eating them, and that means that there aren't as many in our world. So of all these fish, a lot of them are actually used as a food resource for us, and if we eat them a little bit too much, then we actually don't have as many for us and for the other animals that live in this habitat, because they're larger animals, and I know all of you are thinking shark, but this is a cold habitat, so there aren't that many large sharks that would eat these type of fish in this habitat. However, a lot of animals that love fish, like an octopus, because we have giant Pacific octopus at our aquarium, and also a whole bunch of mammals like to eat these types of fish, like seals. And those animals would not be able to survive if we didn't respect our animals. But you can easily respect your animals by making sure you know where your food comes from the grocery store. Other than fish inside this habitat, we have kelp. So if you look inside, there are all of these green structures in here. Now, for a couple seconds, I just want everybody to think of the kelp here, and I want you to think to yourself, do you think it is real kelp or not real kelp? So I'll give you a good look at it. What do you think? Do you think it's real or not real? You made your guess in your head. It's actually not real. It's completely fake. Although it looks real, kelp in our habitat here is not real because it grows so fast. It grows 2 feet or 60 centimeters every single day. And that is just too much for us to keep trimming down. It's a lot of extra effort that way. So we would prefer to have the not real stuff in here. And as you can see, based on what is inside this food bucket that Sophie has, our animals don't like to eat greenery. They like to eat fish and other types of sea life, but they're not going to eat plants or algae. They don't really like that. So the kelp in here is completely fake, and every so often we have to take it all out and clean it and put it back in. And kelp in here, kelp grows super duper fast because it's very deep. As you can see, we're at the bottom of the habitat and it goes all the way up here. And if it was real, it would have to grow really, really fast to get up to the top where sunlight is. And sunlight actually helps the kelp grow because it is a type of algae. So algae plants are very similar, but algae is a little bit more simple than a plant is. Oh, there's a really large rockfish he came by. That really large fish right there, the white one. He's one of our oldest fish in the aquarium. So this kelp grows super duper fast, which is good for replenishing itself. So there's an animal that loves to eat kelp to control the population and the growth, and that is called a sea urchin. And we don't have any in here. Not that they would get confused because they don't have eyes. However, in the wild, they would eat the bottom part of the kelp, and these little bulbs that you can see on the edges of the kelp actually help the kelp float, so it helps it grow a little bit faster. And that those little bulbs are filled with air, and that helps it be buoyant. So if the sea urchins eat the very bottom of the kelp, then the kelp will float up to the surface, and it may not survive that ordeal, which is not the best for the kelp. But it's also not so great for any of the other animals because, as you can see, there's many fish that like kelp as a habitat, a place to hide in. Some fish, not the ones we have here, obviously, but other fish like to have a good food resource as kelp. Oh, there's our wolf eel coming back again, probably still hungry. There has to be an animal that eats sea urchins because sea urchins, if they were everywhere, they would just eat up all the kelp forest and we wouldn't have any left. So what we do have in nature are called sea otters, and they love to eat sea urchins. They're actually really good at it. Sea urchins have spikes, and most animals can't eat them because of their spikes. So what sea otters do is they actually scrape off their spikes and crack it open with a rock, and then they eat the insides. So sadly, sea otters are very soft and fluffy, and people have actually used them to make coats. So we, as humans, crashed their population a long time ago, and the sea urchin population went really, really high, and then there was no more kelp forest because it was all eaten out. And that's actually really scary because then all the fish left and there was no good habitat there. However, because kelp grows really fast, all we had to do as scientists was take some sea otters from one area and relocate them so that there were sea otters again, and they ate the sea urchins because they thought they were very yummy, and then the kelp forest grew back very quick. And that's one of those happy stories where we can actually do something to help our world out. So we can actually do stuff to make our world a better place. And as you can see, I'm actually trying to stay away from this, but if I move a little bit this way, you can see a line in the middle of your screen. That's actually where you can see the 2 panes of acrylic meet. So instead of having glass at our aquarium, we have acrylic, and that is 1 foot thick. Because there's a ton of water pressure on this habitat here, because as you can see, it is very tall and there's a lot of water in it. And if you look closely at our habitat here, you may notice there's something missing from this habitat that is present in every lake, river, and ocean. And the one thing that's missing is garbage and litter. We have a very pristine habitat here for our animals to make sure that they are always healthy and safe and happy in their habitat. And we want to make sure that they are having a nice, safe home to live in. So we make sure that there's no garbage or litter. But remember, in the natural world, there's always garbage and litter. So there's a very easy way for you to help out our animals. Is not only make sure you don't litter, because I'm sure all of you are very nice to your animals in the habitats. However, one of the easiest things that you can do is use things that are more reusable. So like a water bottle you can keep for a really long time, or a bag that you can bring over and over to the grocery store instead of those plastic flimsy ones that you end up throwing away. You can also end up, there's feeding a small one at the bottom. And then you can also end up helping out by picking up garbage that you see. That will actually help out a lot. A lot of the garbage that goes on the ground ends up in the oceans at one point or another. And if we work together, we can actually make our world a better place, not only for us, but for all of the other sea life that we have in our wonderful world. So, Joe, that's all I had to say. So if we want to open it up for questions, that would be great.
Excellent. Well, this is great. This is a great signal today. It's really neat to watch the diver working with the different fish, and I think that wolf eel is so cool. So I'm jealous they get to hang out and spend so much time with it. All right. Well, let's meet some of our classrooms because we have a great group of classrooms who have just joined us. Let's start off in Richmond Hill, Ontario. We have some kindergartners joining us with Mrs. Kane. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, kindergartners? All right. Who's got a question about the tank?
Why they're swimming on the ocean?
I didn't quite catch that question.
Why are they swimming in the ocean?
Oh, why are they swimming in the ocean? Well, this is actually just a habitat at our aquarium. I can turn and you can see that there's floor here. So this is not the real ocean. However, all of these divers have definitely swum in the ocean before. And what they are doing is they are feeding our animals. That's the reason they're in the water, other than to say hi to all of you. So they are in here to feed our animals. As you can see, the fish in here are really good at coming toward the diver to get food, and that's because that's how we always feed them. So they're actually pretty confident to come toward the diver to get their food. Not all of our animals are like that. Sometimes we throw the food in at the top, and they don't really come that close.
All right, kindergarten, do you guys have another question?
What do fish eat?
What do fish eat? Fish really like to eat fish. So it's a fish eat fish world out there. But the fish today are eating different types of fish, and they're also eating squid, because I can definitely see some squid that they're eating today.
All right, great questions to get us started. Let's meet another classroom now. Let's go to Freehold, New Jersey. We have two grade 3 classrooms with Mrs. Close and Mrs. Doyle joining us. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, grade 3s?
My name is Umberto and I have a question. How many species do you have? How many?
Yep, that was how many species are in the tank.
Oh, thank you. How many species are in the tank? Well, I'm not actually certain because there are not that many different types of fish in here, but there are tons of different species because there are probably between 20 and 30 different types of rockfish in here. So it is one of our more diverse habitats as there are lots of fish, and there's also some sea stars and some sea anemones that are at the bottom. You can see two, like there's a sea star, and then those pink things, those are anemones. Same with the little white things. So I'd say it's probably around 50 different species.
All right, excellent. Let's turn the microphone back on with our grade 3s and let them ask another question.
With our class? Doyle's
Yep.
class?
Yep.
Do some fish have camouflage? Some fish have camouflage?
Yes, some fish do have camouflage. So there is a fish at the bottom, which is kind of hard to see. There's a fish in front of it. But right here, that fish is really good at pretending to be a rock. That's called a sculpin. And this other fish here, this flatfish, they are called flounder, and they're very good at hiding as well because they are so flat, so they can just blend in with the bottom of the water. Some fish are not so good at camouflaging, like this orange and white striped fish. That's a type of rockfish. But they might not need to. They could live in dark enough habitats where they can't really see their color, or it's a good way for them to scare their predators away. It's a different way of survival instead of camouflaging in their habitat.
All right, great questions, grade 3s. Let's see, let's go to Mississauga this time. We have a grade 5 classroom with Mrs. Haney. Let me turn their microphone on. Hi, grade 5s.
Ow, my head. Turn on.
Dean, do you want to?
No.
Okay, let's let Dean ask us.
Why do you guys have to like go in the tank and feed them?
We go into the habitat to feed our animals because that is what they are used to. So we trained them a long time ago to come toward us in order to get their food. However, these animals, in the wild, they would normally get their food on their own by hunting. However, that is not always the case here. Sometimes we want to make sure that they come up to say hi so we can feed them, so we make sure they eat the right amount of food, which doesn't always happen. But we want to make sure that they're confident enough to come to us so they can get enough food for them to eat. I'm pretty sure a diver might come back down, just wants to drop their bucket.
All right. And the divers, while they're in the water, are they kind of looking maybe at the health of some of the fish as well?
Yeah, so they'll be looking at the health of the animals as well, and they will also be especially the wolf eels, because we only have 2. They're easy to tell apart, and you can actually look at them and see how they're feeling and if they're coming towards to get food. Oh, she's going to feed the anemones, actually. So these pink flower-looking things at the very bottom, that's what she's trying to feed. So she has this little squeeze bottle filled with food.
Very cool. Let's open it up to Mrs. Haney's class again, see if they have another question.
Hassan.
How come there's a whole bunch of fish in the same tank when one might eat the other?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of different animals in here, and one might eat another, but it's unlikely. One big reason is their mouths are smaller than the bodies of the fish in here, and the other big reason is that we feed them well enough that they're not hungry. I know humans are kind of the exception to this, but most animals will only eat if they're hungry. We would prefer not to, oh, perfect, right up to the front. So we can actually see what she's feeding. She's actually feeding the barnacles right now. She picked up a clump of barnacles. She's squirting shrimp at their face. So hopefully you can see them take their fan out of their bodies, which is how they filter feed. But they could be a little shy.
And a feed like this, how long does it usually take to make sure you don't miss anyone?
It's usually just about a half hour, so the time that they've been in here with us. Sometimes they spend less than that time, depending on how much time we have to spend with the animals. However, we'd like to spend a half hour just to make sure that we get everyone, because if the fish were like me, I'd rather not fight for my food. I'd rather wait for the food to come to me.
All right. Our next classroom is joining us from Park Ridge, Illinois. They're a grade 4 class. This is Eschenbaum. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, grade 4s? All right, who's got a question? Nice and loud.
I have a question. Neymar, do you have a question?
How big is the fish tank?
How big is the fish habitat? It is 24 feet deep, which is a short bus turned on its end. And it has a ton of water in it. It's actually number 2 in the amount of water that's in here, which is around 300,000 liters.
All right, and I'll turn your microphone on one more time if you have another question from Illinois. Go ahead.
If I heard you correctly, are you saying that flatfish when they're young have one eye on each side?
Oh, were you talking about the flatfish?
Yeah,
So
she had a great question. If she was just making sure she heard you, that they have their eyes on both sides when they're young.
Yes, you're correct. The flatfish, there's one coming up, so I can show you the flatfish. You can see the 2 eyes, the 2 circles on the top. That's what happens when they get older. When they're young, they look just like most other fish, like a typical fish with both eyes on the one eye on one side and one eye on the other, just like a typical fish. And there's a reason for that. Those fish usually get pretty big. If you're a pretty big fish and you're a slow mover, you need to either hide in a cave or you need to find a different way to survive. So those animals over evolutionary time have become skinnier and they hide not in caves but on the bottom. And they pretend to be the sea ground.
All right, that's an amazing transformation to go from the two sides and then shift everything over to the one. It's pretty cool. Okay, let's go to Mrs. Rassica's group. They're joining us from Smooth Rock Falls in Ontario. And there's some grade 4, 5s, and 6s. Let me try and turn your microphone on.
What is the most popular fish in the entire aquarium?
I didn't quite catch that.
I think it was, what is the most popular fish in the entire aquarium?
The popular fish? Well, it really depends on what you like the most. I'd say that the sharks in our shark tunnel are the most popular fish because they look scary because they have their teeth sticking out. Those are called the sand tiger sharks. But I know a lot of people come here to see our octopus, and that's a giant Pacific octopus, which would normally live in this habitat we're filming right now. However, if she lived in here, she'd eat all the fish. So she lives in a different habitat without any fish.
All right, that's probably a good thing then. Smooth Rock Falls, if you have another question, go ahead.
We do. How much kilograms of meat and food do you feed your fish? How many kilograms of food do you feed your fish per day?
I didn't catch that one either.
Yeah, that's okay. There's a little feedback, but they're wondering how many kilograms do you feed the fish a day?
Oh, well, it depends on which habitat you're talking about. Each fish gets fed what they can actually eat every day, and we don't feed them per day either. So this habitat is not fed every single day. So we are feeding the animals in total in our whole aquarium 800 pounds of food a week. Most of that goes into our big shark habitat. It's about 65%. So the other 35% goes into the rest of the habitats. So it is a lot of food.
All right, and just give us an idea of the number, roughly the number of animals at the entire aquarium.
Oh, we have around 16,000 16,000 animals at our aquarium, and it's between 400 and 500 different species.
Wow, and 800 pounds a week, that's surprising. I thought that would have been a little bit more.
Yes, it is surprising, but fish don't eat every day. We're a little bit different because we have a really high metabolism and we're very active, so we have to eat all the time. But fish don't actually have to eat as often as we do. So, for example, this habitat here gets fed 2 to 3 times a week. So it's not fed that often. And our large sharks only eat 3 times a week.
All right, awesome. Well, our final classroom is joining us from Chatham, Ontario, a grade 2 classroom with Mrs. Brecca. Let me see if I can turn... Actually, you're just off my screen. So Mrs. Brecca, if you're there, can you turn the mic on for us? And actually, I don't see them anymore, so maybe they had to duck out. All right. Well, shout out to Chatham, Ontario anyways. So we have about 3 or 4 more minutes. So if any classroom has another question, give me a big wave at the camera, and I'll come back to your classroom. So let's start off with Mrs. Doyle's group.
How do sea otters eat sea urchins if they're so spiky?
How do sea otters eat sea urchins if they're so spiky?
Yep.
So sea otters are able to use tools. So they actually use rocks usually, and they can take the spikes off with rocks. So that's something that easily you can do and practice at home. If you find a burr, like this little seeds with lots of spikes on them, and you take a rock and you can actually scrape off all the spikes with the rock very easily. And the sea otter can do the exact same thing. And they use their belly as a cutting board, and then they will crack open the inside with the same rock and eat the yummy insides.
All right, great question. Give me another wave in a classroom if you guys want me to come visit you again. All right, let's go to Mrs. Eschenbaum's group. Your microphone's on. I didn't. Can they come a little closer? I'm just not catching the question. Can you try and repeat it for me, Mrs. Eschenbaum?
Sure. We're wondering what's the biggest fish at the aquarium.
Just going to turn Danielle's volume down just for a minute. Try one more time.
What's the biggest fish at the aquarium?
Excellent. I got it that time.
I caught that too. What's the biggest fish in the aquarium? So the biggest fish in the aquarium is our sawfish, and that animal is roughly 500 pounds. And the female is the larger of the two, and she is 14 feet long. The sawfish is an animal that looks like they have a saw on the front of their face, and that animal is actually really closely related to a stingray. If you ever come to our aquarium, you will always see them resting on the top of our tunnels because they are awake at nighttime. They're nocturnal. They like to nap on the top of our shark tunnel.
All right. And I think a great question to kind of end off on today is about a job at the aquarium or in a field similar to, say, the divers or such. Is there kind of one career path, or can you work at the aquarium a variety of different ways?
There's not too many ways that you can work at the aquarium, but there's many different things you can do here. So my job is an educator, so I usually talk to a lot of people, but my job does not include going into the water. There are some people here who are just divers. That means they're in the water just to dive. And then there are other people here, which are all of the ones that you've seen so far in the habitat the divers here. These are called aquarists. So they actually look after certain habitats and make sure that those animals are healthy. Usually a habitat this large would be taken care of by somebody who has a lot of experience because they have to look after so many different animals. So for example, Sophie actually doesn't work with this habitat. She works with jellyfish. And she is very good at working with the jellyfish. And the more experience you get, the more you can do with it. But it really depends on what you like. Because if you like a certain type of fish, then you'll probably want to work with them more and learn more about them. However, there are many other careers that you can go into. Our aquarium doesn't do that much research, but there are definitely aquariums out there that do more research and more rehabilitation in the wild. And there's definitely a vet here as well, who doesn't actually work at our aquarium, but she comes here every Wednesday, so she was here today, and she comes to look at our animals as well. So there's many different career paths if you want to go into this.
All right, very cool. Well, Danielle, we're hitting our half-hour mark. So first of all, I want to give you a huge thank you, as always, for great information and for answering all the questions for the students. And then you'll have to, when Sophie and Sam get out of the water, you'll have to say thank you for us as well.
Oh, I will definitely say thank you.
All right.
And thank you for having me.
Oh, of course, always. So I'm going to turn the microphones on. We'll let the classroom say goodbye and thank you. Maybe if they're loud enough, Sophie will hear them. But
yeah.
we'll give that a go, and then we'll sign off for today. So here we go. Microphones are coming on. All right. Well, once again, boys and girls, I hope you have great afternoons. I hope the rest of your days are lots of fun. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to our next hangout at Ripley. So thanks, Danielle.